So there's gold in those hills in the Sperrins. Did you know that? I had no idea a few weeks ago, and I was invited to a talk given by Fidelma from Save Our Sperrins, and I went along, not quite sure what to expect, but knowing that ecologically, you know, I wanted to get more involved in doing things that would be useful and would save our planet. And this sounded like something that I could potentially get involved with. So I went along, and as I listened to Fidelma, I got more and more horrified. Gold mining is an incredibly destructive process, and I had no idea about the ins and outs of it. And I came away and I thought, well, okay, but is that the truth? Because when you hear something, you've got to investigate it and research it yourself. You can't just take it. Even if it chimes with you and you believe it to be true, it's always good to double check and make sure. Due diligence. We all should do our own due diligence. So, what I recommend is that you get yourself a cup of tea because this is quite long, this presentation of mine, because I spent the next several weeks investigating gold mining around the world, because the way I look at it, how they behave in one part of the world is how they're going to behave here. And gold mining doesn't keep the things that they do a secret. The industry doesn't keep the things that they do a secret. Um, all the information is there online if you care to look for it. And I looked for it, and in my day job, I am a research scientist. I work in neuroscience and epigenetics, mostly about mind body health. And so this was something different, but I feel it's really important, and I hope that this helps you understand the potential for destruction that is allowing these companies to come to Northern Ireland and desecrate the countries that we live in. So you don't have to take my word for it. Everything that I have in this presentation comes from the mining industry or from independent experts. And you can easily find this stuff online yourself. And there's so much that I didn't use. Um, because the gold mining industry is truly global and there's not a part of the world that they're not in. So get yourself a cup of tea because this lasts just over an hour, and let me take you by the hand and show you what gold mining is all about and what we are facing here in not just Northern Ireland but in Ireland if we don't stop it in its tracks now. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Mark Patton of the Geological Survey of Northern Ireland, and this is what he has to say.
Okay, what we're looking at here is the surface development works of what has the potential to be the 7th biggest gold mine globally. My name is Mark Patton. I am the minerals geologist at the Geological Survey of Northern Ireland, Belfast. We are in the Sperrin Mountains in Northern Ireland. The gold mineralisation was initially discovered in the 80s. At the time, they knew there was probably enough to start developing, but because of the political situation in Northern Ireland and because it's narrow vein mesothermal gold systems, the only way to get it out economically is to blast it, and that wasn't an option in Northern Ireland at that time. Because of the way that Northern Ireland is developing, because of the peace process, because we are moving forward, it's now possible for this company to come on site and start working this deposit as a viable economic deposit in Northern Ireland. So what we have here is an example of the kind of mineralization that we've got. It's not what you would call free gold. It's very difficult to extract, but it's still possible to extract. But if you pan the streams in this area, what you can get is some real gold that you can actually pan out of the streams. I'm responsible for making sure that the work programs that the companies submit are reasonable for what they hope to achieve, and then through site visits, actually making sure that the companies are carrying out what they've said They will do, and hopefully through the course of my career, I'm going to be on site as they work through the planned 18-year mine life. In terms of the benefit for Northern Ireland, you can see this area. It's very rural. And my understanding from speaking with the company is that they're providing jobs that are preventing the local kids who are growing up in this area from having to leave to get a well-paid job. This central resource area only forms part of 12 kilometres of strike. The potential upside, 12 million ounces, who knows? Who's to say how much is in there? There's a horrible cliche about there being gold in them there hills. All I can say is this particular hill, there is gold.
So you've heard what Mark has to say, or rather, let's not make it personal. You've heard what the Geological Survey for Northern Ireland has to say, and they're saying that potentially this could be the 7th biggest gold mine globally. And I'm going to take a few of his statements and just dissect them and show you what that means, okay? So this is Combayu in Peru, before becoming the 5th biggest gold mine in the world. And you see, it's very pastoral, or to use the word that the Geological Survey seems to think is beyond the pale, it's rural, and it's green, it's lush, it's farmland. It could be almost the Sperrins, really, except we don't have hills quite as high as that. But so that's Combayu, Peru. So this was Combayu as mining developed. So you can see there's a great big sand-coloured crater where they've exposed the rock to the sky and the air. But there's still plenty of green around that. And you think that's, you know, if potentially there's great benefit from mining, then maybe you could live with a scar on the land like that. However, this is Combayu, Peru as it is now. This is Yanacocha, which is the world's 5th largest gold mine. This is what the Sperrins could look like. Okay? So we have that in store for us. So it's a viable economic deposit. What does that mean? So it's estimated that the Coronalt contains over 6 million ounces of gold. The deposit is still open in all directions. In other words, the ends of it have not been found. And that's from Dalradian.com, which is the company that has the exploration license for the Sperrins. And as you heard, the Northern Ireland Geological Survey believes that the potential upside, 12 million ounces, who knows? Now, there's a big difference between 12 million and 6 million, but we'll leave that to one side. So I wanted to see just what 6 million ounces of gold was worth in monetary terms. So 6 million troy ounces, which is what the mining industry calls ounces for some reason, is that huge number with all the zeros on it. Now I didn't know how to say that number. I had to actually, again, turn to trusty Google, type that number in and say, how do I say that? So it's 250 trillion 772 billion $976 million. Now you'd need to be winning a few Euro million jackpots to be getting that, wouldn't you? Now 10 million troy ounces, and I put 10 million rather than 12 million because in actual fact the internet converter doesn't go up as far as 12, it stops at 10 million. So what are 10 million troy ounces worth? Well, they're worth 417 trillion 906 billion $720 million, and those values are based on the spot price of gold on the 11th of April 2019. So we're talking massive numbers. So what are the main social and economic benefits of the proposed mine? Well, the total employment boost of some 1,000 jobs, direct employment of at least 350, 455 indirect jobs at suppliers, and 165 induced jobs from increased spending in the area. The average salary for the workers of the mine is to be around 40,000, which is nearly twice the average salary in Northern Ireland. Stemming the outflow of young talent from the west of Northern Ireland, training and skills development, including course development with Southwest College and internships. More than 1 billion in spending to build and operate the mine, creating supplier opportunities in West Tyrone and Northern Ireland. It's a Brexit-proof project because you can't move a mine, and it's 2.4% reduction in Northern Ireland's trade deficit potentially. 360 million capital investment over the life of the mine with a 4 million community fund commitment, and that's on Dalradian's website. So you can find all of that on Dalradian. That's what they're saying are the main social and economic benefits of the proposed mine. I just want to look at the top two proposed benefits according to Dalradian. Now, the first one is the total employment boost of some 1,000 jobs. Now, let's just look at that first of all. One, they can only actually confirm the direct employment of at least 350 permanent jobs. And looking at those 350 permanent jobs, the likes of the management and the specialised mining jobs won't be going to anybody in Tyrone or even Northern Ireland because nobody here has been trained in the mining industry. We don't know how to work in a mine. 455 indirect jobs at suppliers? I don't know. And they don't know. They're guessing. 165 induced jobs from increased spending in the area. Well, we could go back to the NI Geological Survey's comment about it being rural. There's nothing there, so what are they going to spend their money on? And then just look at the average salary of 40,000, which is nearly twice the average salary in Northern Ireland. And why is our salaries in Northern Ireland so depressed and kept so low? Well, it could be because Invest NI keeps selling us as a low cost workforce. So we never get employers coming here who actually want to pay decent wages. And the other side of that is 40,000 for going down to work in a dirty, dangerous job. Well, 40,000 according to the mining forums that I've been on is low, and they won't. There's plenty of miners on these forums that are saying they won't come to Northern Ireland because it's less pay than they get anywhere else in the world. So the average salary of Northern Ireland, while it might be higher than that, it's still low for its industry because they're basing it here in Northern Ireland. So the benefits to Northern Ireland according to the Northern Ireland Geological Survey. This area is very rural. My understanding in speaking with the company, they are providing jobs that are preventing the local kids that are growing up in this area from having to leave to get well paid jobs. So just to give a view on that from someone who already has a mine in their area, no one likes working underground, but we have no choice. Local union rep at Mopane, Anglo Gold Ashanti's mine in South Africa. Very different views of the mining jobs. So let's take a quick detour into why is gold so valuable right now. The price of gold is higher than it's ever been in 17 years. It's now pushing $500 an ounce. And the soaring demand for jewellery consumes 80% or more of the gold mined today, so it's still all going for consumer jewellery mostly. And it's newly moneyed consumers who shop in China and India that have sent jewellery sales shooting to a record 38 billion in 2010. Sales surged in that year by 11% in China and 47% in India, and they've increased year on year by between 2 to 4% ever since. In fact, the only year that they didn't increase was 2013 for some reason, but ever since then they have continued to increase. India is a country of 1 billion people with a seemingly insatiable appetite for gold, making it gold's largest consumer. And this is probably why, because Indian weddings place a huge cultural significance on gold. The They get gold sets for the bride, for everyone in the bridal party, the groom's mum, the bride's mum, everyone, every female seems to get a gold set. And then the groom and all the men get gold gifts as well. So gold is really significant, and as India gets more and more wealthy, they're buying more and more gold. But it's not just India and China. The United States is the world's second largest consumer of gold, and it also is the world's largest holder of gold reserves. The US government has over 8,000 tons secured in vaults, which is worth about 122 billion. And the Federal Reserve and other major central banks like the Bank of England renewed an agreement to severely restrict sales from their reserves, which in effect offers a price support to gold. They're holding the price of gold high because they're not releasing their stock. And the price of gold isn't simply a matter of supply and demand, it's also of market psychology. Gold is bought by anxious investors when the dollar is weak and the economy is uncertain. And so that's a really big reason for gold's high price today. So is the glitter worth the grime? Because the price of gold determines virtually everything. It determines where it's mined, how much is mined, and how tiny are the flecks worth going after. You can mine gold ore at a lower grade than any other metal, said Wyke Meyerman, a mine specialist at the Denver office of the EPA, which is America's Environmental Protection Agency. That means big open pits, but it must also be easy and cheap to be profitable, and that means cyanide. I just want to repeat that last part of Mike's quote there. That means big open pits, but it must also be easy and cheap to be profitable, and that means cyanide. So just consider a simple gold ring, okay? For that 1 ounce of gold, miners dig up and haul away 30 tons of rock and sprinkle it with diluted cyanide, which separates the gold from the rock. Gold actually generates more waste per ounce than any other metal and has few industrial uses. So you see a simple gold ring on one side of the picture, and this rock fall, which I found online, which has the headline of a 30-ton rockfall. So that's how much rock has to be excavated to get the ounce of gold. And that's not counting the earth that gets excavated to get to the rock that has gold in it. So, what cost gold? Hard rock mining generates more toxic waste than any other industry. The basics of mining are that they use an enormous drill to burrow deep into the rock, where they then plant explosives. The next shift then drags the blasted rock to the surface. The costs and scrutiny of mining is on the rise in rich countries where the best ores have been depleted, and by those countries I mean the USA and Canada for the most part. 70% of gold is now mined in developing countries like Guatemala and Ghana, and now here in Northern Ireland, potentially. Environmental groups say that companies are mining in ways that would never be tolerated in the wealthier nations, such as dumping tons of waste into rivers, bays and oceans. People who live closest to the mine say that they see too few of mining's benefits and bear too much of its burdens. So that massive operation that you saw at the start of the slideshow at Yanacocha in Peru, that's a sprawling mine that's run by Newmont, which is a Canadian mining company. And the rolling green hills of northern Peru have been carved into sand-coloured mesas, and it now looks more like arid Arizona than the Peruvian highlands. Mountains have actually been systematically blasted, then carted off by massive trucks that are the size of houses, restacked into stepped pyramids of chunky ore. These new man-made mountains are lined with irrigation hoses that then silently trickle millions of gallons of cyanide solution over the rock for years. The cyanide dissolves the gold so it can be separated and smelted. At sites like Yanacocha, 1 ounce of gold is sprinkled in 30 tons of ore. But to get at that ore, many more tons of earth have to be moved, and are then left as waste. At some mines in Nevada, 100 tons or more of earth have to be excavated for a single ounce of gold, said Anne Meist, a geochemist who consults on mining issues. Mining companies say they are meeting a demand, and that this kind of gold mining, called cyanide heap leaching, is as good a use of the land as any, or better. Now, cyanide is not the only option, but it is considered the most cost effective way to retrieve the microscopic bits of invisible gold. Profit margins are too thin, miners say, and the gold left in the world too scarce to mine it any other way. The heap is cheaper, said Shannon W. Dunlap, an environmental manager with Placer Dome, another Canadian mining company. Our ore wouldn't work without the heap. Now, those masses of disturbed rock, exposed to the rain and air for the first time, are another multi-billion-dollar environmental time bomb. Sulfides in that rock react with oxygen, making sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid pollutes, and it also releases heavy metals like cadmium, lead, and mercury into the environment, and they're harmful to people and fish even at low concentrations. And amazingly, this chain reaction can go on for centuries. Now, cyanide, like sulfuric acid, also presents long-term problems. Most scientists agree that cyanide decomposes in sunlight and is not dangerous if greatly diluted. We live in Northern Ireland, which doesn't get that much sunlight, so that doesn't actually benefit us in any way. But a survey by the United States Geological Survey in 2000 said that cyanide can convert to other toxic forms and persist, particularly in cold climates. And as cyanide dissolves gold out of the rock, it releases harmful metals too. There have been significant accidents involving cyanide. From 1985 to 2000, more than a dozen reservoirs containing cyanide-laden mine waste collapsed, said the United Nations Environmental Programme. And one of the most severe disasters occurred in Romania in 2000. The cyanide solution in this mine in Romania was carried by pipe to two above ground storage lakes, which were between the villages of Sazar and Bazanta, 12 kilometres south of Biomer. Now, this was the largest the largest lake that burst a dike on the night of the 30th of January 2000, and it poured 130,000 cubic metres of cyanide tainted water into the tributaries of the Danube River and the Tisa. The mine waste spilled into all of those tributaries and killing more than 1,000 tons of fish, and it issued a plume of cyanide that reached 1,600 miles away to the Black Sea. In the valley, an industrial landscape of dead rivers, polluted lands, and sick people exists even now. In fact, the BBC went back a few years ago to see how things had improved, and they hadn't at all. And in the river Cesar, no fish have been seen there since cyanide was first used in gold mining here 60 years ago. And sick people were talking about cancers, especially. It's dreadful what happened in Romania, absolutely dreadful. But what makes it worse was that even after that one big leak, the second lake burst its dam. It wasn't as bad, and it was only a few days later. So, that place is just blighted now. Gold mining companies have been going out to remote corners of the globe, led by a powerful guide, the World Bank. We invest to help reduce poverty and help improve people's life, said Rashad Rudolph Kaldani, who's the head of the oil, gas and mining at the bank's profit-making arm, the International Finance Corporation. So they're actually looking to help reduce poverty and improve people's lives, said the World Bank. No other reason for going into gold mining. And at its urging, more than 100 cash-strapped governments have agreed to cut taxes and royalties to lure big mining companies. So we're not going to help make the countries rich because we're going to actually reduce the taxes and royalties that they're going to pay. Okay. At the same time, the bank has put up money for or insured more than 30 gold mining projects as it looks for more profits. Mining is a small part of the bank's portfolio, but it's not without controversy as accidents mount. In one of the worst disasters in 1995, a mine in Guyana, insured by the World Bank, spilled more than 790,000 gallons of cyanide-laced mine waste into a tributary of the Essequibo River, which is the country's main water source. It was so bad that by 2001 the World Bank President James D. Wolfensohn imposed a 2-year moratorium on mining investments and ordered a review of its involvement in the industry. You notice he didn't stop it, he just put a moratorium on it. Now they chose Emil Salim, a former Minister of the Environment of Indonesia, to lead the study. Up to now, the International Finance Corporation was only listening to business, he said. So I said, let's give some voice to civil society. So let's see. Mr. Salim recommended reducing the use of cyanide, banning the disposal of waste in rivers and oceans, and giving communities veto power over mining company plans. Pretty strong democratic plans there. But of course the mining industry didn't like that. So the bank settled on more modest goals, significantly more modest goals if you ask me. It pledged to make environmental impact statements understandable to villagers and to back only projects with broad community support. So they're not going to reduce the use of cyanide or ban the disposal of waste in rivers and oceans, but will only go with projects with broad community support. Well, we'll see how that pans out. It also urged governments to spend mining company taxes and royalties in the communities near the mines. Now, the World Bank's guidelines for arsenic in drinking water are less stringent than those of the World Health Organization, and mercury contamination levels are more lenient than those permitted by the EPA, said Andrea Durbin, who's a consultant to non-governmental groups pressing for tougher standards. And Manish Bepna, who's an executive director of the Bank Information Centre, a group that monitors the bank, said, the rules give mining companies even more latitude. They will make it easier for companies to evict indigenous people and to mine in some of the globe's most treasured habitats. So let's look at that whole only with broad local support rule that the World Bank actually took on board. So in Guatemala, opposition was fierce to a proposed mine. In 2010, angry farmers set up roadblocks to stop trailers carrying the equipment for the mine. And after 40 days and battles between police and protesters, the equipment was escorted through by soldiers. To persuade the villagers of the mine's benefits, Glamis, and they're another Canadian mining company, flew 19 plane loads of farmers to a mine it runs in Honduras, and local people still said they didn't want it. And independent researchers found that the bank's mining study was badly lacking. It did not address the very large quantities of water the mine would use, or give basic information on the massive volumes of waste that the mine would produce. Evidence suggested that proper consultation did not occur before the company was granted both exploration and exploitation licenses, which is a violation of international law. Now, one of the local community spokesmen and leader of their council talked about the reinvigorated resistance movement in 2015 that was aimed specifically at defending the results of the 2005 public consultation. He said, "Why do I continue with the struggle? Why do we continue with the struggle? Because we love our water, we love our land, we love our natural resources. This is why we're in the struggle." So Ghana. Now Ghana is considered the Gold Coast because it is so rich in gold. But industrial mining has not lived up to its promise for local people there either, because the men who couldn't find work inside the highly mechanised mines of Ghana's first world investors have become illegal miners, scavenging on the waste left behind by Anglo Gold Ashanti, the world's second largest gold company, which is based in South Africa. Many of these illegal miners die, most of them overcome by fumes when the waste from the mine gushes into the pit where they work. And recently 22 miners became trapped deep underground in an illegal mine. Rescuers tried unsuccessfully to reach them for 5 days, but they were forced to concede defeat. They declared the men dead and sealed the pit. Now the mine has tried to keep the men out, and they've even resorted to using guard dogs, but local protests thankfully stopped that practice. In the nearby village of Sanso, men said that they'd lost their land to the Ashanti mine, and now they are illegal miners, carving shafts into a mountain of waste rock where they haul, hammer, chip and sift because there is no other work. You wake up one day and you realise your farm is destroyed, said Assemblyman Benjamin Annan, a local politician. They say they will compensate, but it takes 1 or 2 years, so people are compelled to go to illegal mining the way our ancestors did. Newmont, which is another Canadian mining company, is set to spend $1 billion on a new mine in Ghana, and it's in one of the badly deforested country's last remaining forest preserves. So much for preserving the natural habitats. The investment has been greeted warmly by the government in Ghana, but the chief financial officer has said that he is offended by the poor conditions of the villagers where the mines operate, because most of these people get relocated, and they build new villages for them, and most people would rather actually still keep their land and farm their land. And this government official, the chief financial officer, he actually said that going to the town of Abusu, sometimes we feel embarrassed. Not enough has gone back into the company, because most of the company's taxes and royalties had stayed in the capital. So let's just look at a first world country, because just in case you think that, oh, that only happens in Africa and South America and it won't happen here, let's see what happened in America. So in Montana, USA, the Zortman Landusky mine was the first of its kind, the first large-scale open-pit cyanide operation in the States when it opened in 1979. And the imprint it left on the environment of Montana continues today. Now, reports say that what happened there was a multi-layered disaster that involved bankruptcy, bad science, environmental havoc, and regulatory gaps. Overly ambitious production schedules by the mine's owner, Pegasus Gold, based in Canada, were to blame, say others. Now, at Zortman, the company made the mistake of building their cyanide heaps atop the waste rock that had already turned acidic and had sulfuric acid. So the cyanide and the sulfuric acid then mixed in an ever increasingly toxic cocktail that seeped from the mines. Now, mining stopped in Zortman in 1996, and the company officials insisted in their public comments over the next year that they wanted to be responsible corporate citizens, and they were going to stay to clean up the property. But the price of gold was falling then, and it was below $280 an ounce, and Pegasus went bankrupt and closed their doors. Now, at Zortman Landusky, the state wrote the environmental impact study itself, based primarily on information from the mining company. The US Environmental Agency, the EPA, had little legal authority then to protect the public from an operating mine, except by filing a lawsuit, which it did in 1995, after Pegasus had already violated federal clean water standards. Now, the company settled the suit in 1996 and agreed to pay $32.3 million, mostly to upgrade and expand water treatment. But Pegasus closed their doors in 1996. And in 2010, Montana's legislator had to create a special fund for water treatment for the next 120 years at a cost of more than 19 million. Now, in 1998, as this catastrophe was making headlines across Montana, voters there approved the nation's first statewide ban on cyanide mining, halting any new gold projects. And they renewed that ban in Montana in 2009. Now, Colombia is another interesting one because the World Bank Tribunal is hearing the ongoing international arbitration that has been put forth by the Canadian mining company Oro Minerals Corp against the state of Colombia. And recent reports that the tribunal is even refusing to hear from those directly affected by mining in Santurban, Colombia. Now, the company Oro is attempting to pursue its Angostura gold mining project in the Santurban Paramo, which is located in the northeast of the country. Now, what the arbitration is doing is it's questioning the decisions that were taken by the Colombian state to protect its paramos, which are the high mountain wetlands, and they are a natural source of water for over 70% of Colombian inhabitants. Colombia could be condemned to pay $746 million US simply for taking decisions to protect its citizens' right to clean water and stopping the mining. Now, Canada's like the world centre for mining, and mining in Canada has a bit of a history. It's a bit like banking in the UK. It's glamorised, it's prioritised, and it is given freedoms to act that no other industry or citizen enjoys, which really does describe banking in the UK. But that's a very different presentation. So, in August 2014. The largest mining waste spill in Canadian history happened at Mount Polley mine near Williams Lake, and the 40-metre high tailings dam collapsed, sending 25 million cubic metres of contaminated sludge and mine waste sweeping into lakes and rivers, into the pristine Quesnel Lake, which is the deepest lake or one of the deepest lakes in the world. And that lake is obviously home to multiple fish species and supplies drinking water to local communities. And no charges have ever been laid, and no fines have ever been levied against Imperial Metals, the parent company of Mount Polley Mining Corp. Mount Polley is considered a textbook case of corporate negligence. Multiple independent and government reports found the mine waste site was poorly constructed and poorly operated. Yet Imperial Metals faced no fines or sanctions, and they didn't even have to pick up the full cost of cleanup. Instead, Canadian and British Columbian taxpayers picked up the tab for it. And 3 years later, those toxic tailings still have not been completely cleaned up. There are still tons of solids lining Hazeltown Creek and lying on the bottom of Quesnel Lake. And to this day, people do not trust the water quality of the lake that they use to drink from. And expensive water filters that people fit clog up within days. And more spills can be expected according to the independent expert engineering panel that looked at the Mount Polley disaster and predicted 2 such tailings storage failures are likely each decade, unless half the 123 storage facilities in the province are decommissioned. The problem with this provincial government is that they have not made sure, when unintended environmental harm happens, that these companies have enough money to respond, independent economist Robin Allen says. Now, not only has Imperial Metals escaped without fine or prosecution after overseeing the worst mining disaster in Canadian history, it was then granted permission to open the even bigger Red Chris mine in northern British Columbia, and it is now on the brink of bankruptcy, potentially leaving taxpayers with an even bigger mess to clean up. Canada is a world superpower in the mining industry, and its record of neglect, shoddy practices and environmental devastation is one of the most underreported stories in the Canadian media. Now, history is made of disasters that people never believed would happen. And the cyanide contamination in Romania was the second biggest pollution in Europe after the Chernobyl event. And the spill killed 80% of all life in the Serbian section of the Tisa. 62 species of fish, 20 of which were under protection, were threatened, and large quantities died by the poisoned water. In Hungary, the water supply of 2.5 million people was destroyed. So just think about what could happen here in a much smaller country. Now, again, Northern Ireland, what the Northern Ireland Geological Survey said in the video at the start is that it's not free gold, it's very difficult to extract, but it is possible to extract. Now, that's not just about blasting the rock out, that's about cyanide heap leaching, which mining companies say this kind of gold mining, called cyanide heap leaching, is as good a use of the land as any, or better. And Patrick Anderson, who's the Dalradian MD, says that this is not a single mine, but a mine camp. So he doesn't actually hope to just have one mine in the Sperrins. He hopes to have a whole mine camp, and I'll say more about that in a minute. Now, gold deposits in Canada that are similar to Curranault are in operation for decades or generations as more gold is discovered, and Dalradian have that on their own website. So who is Dalradian? According to the Northern Miner, which has been providing gold mining news since 1915, Dalradian are eighth in the top 10 Canadian-based gold developers. And Dalradian Resources lists amongst its assets a high-grade gold deposit in Northern Ireland named Curranault. Now, Dalradian, based in Toronto, as I said, is helmed by President and CEO Patrick Anderson, and he first gained industry prominence as the co-founder, president and CEO of Aurelian Resources, which discovered the 13.7 million ounce Fruta del Norte gold deposit in Ecuador in 2006. Now, since 2010, Dalradian has increased Curranault's resource sevenfold, based on 130,000 metres of drilling into 16 veins and 1.7 kilometres of underground development. The feasibility study that they did claimed that the 192 million mine would process 1,400 tonnes per day to produce 130,000 ounces of gold annually over the first 10 years of mine life. And Dalradian had a 36 million cash position at the end of 2016. And I thought it was important that we look at that cash position because we need to know, have they got the money to clean up, if there is, as there usually are, some kind of disaster. Now, Dalradian, as I said, is a mineral exploration and development company, and it's focused on advancing the high-grade Curranault Gold Project in Northern Ireland, a region that has no history of large-scale gold mining. The Curranault project is estimated to hold over 3 million ounces of measured and indicated gold resources, and on top of that another 3.1 million ounces of inferred material. So that's Dalradian's 6 million ounces. One of the project's main competitive strengths is the high reserve grade, which would place it in the top 10% of gold mines worldwide, said the feasibility study. So that's in line with what the NIGS said about it being in the top 10 gold mines globally. What is very encouraging is that there are multiple opportunities to enhance the economics and extend the project life, said the feasibility study. And taking Curranault to production continues to be the company's primary goal. Now, Dalradian submitted a 10,000 page planning application on the 27th of November. Now, this is the biggest planning application that Northern Ireland has ever seen. The Civil Service here have never seen anything like this before. Um, it's insane. But anyway, and so again, a bit like Montana, we are having people that have absolutely no expertise or experience looking at this planning application. And the planning application highlights include the underground mine, the cyanide processing plant, a mercury smelting furnace, a huge toxic waste storage facility, contaminated water storage ponds, wastewater treatment plant, a paste backfill plant, an electricity substation, an explosive store, fueling and maintenance facilities, 5 metre high rock berms and 2.2 metre high fencing, 24-hour lighting around the site, and retention of the exploratory site. So it's going to be fairly invasive in the Sperrins. Now this is what an actual dry stack facility looks like, and that, as you can see, is in a bright, sunny, dry place. Now, just imagine, if you will, all of that waste rock coming into contact with the air, the wind, and the rain of Northern Ireland, and spreading those toxic particles all over the country, because they're not going to stay in one place. And as the rain mixes with that rock, we're going to get more sulfuric acid, and it's going to seep further, deeper. This is a catastrophe in the making. Now, according to NIEA, over 25% of Northern Ireland has exploration and prospecting licence issued against it. That's a quarter of the country. InvestNI have granted Dalradian around 360,000, just over actually 360,000 for exploration in the Sperrins. That was when Arlene headed up the department. And despite the scale and the obvious detrimental consequences of this strategy, there's been no environmental impact assessment, there's been no health impact assessment, there's been no real economic impact assessment where we look at the cost of gold mining to the local population, to the country as a whole, for actually being able to minimise and rectify the effects of gold mining. Now, there are at least 3 civil service departments working on Dalradian's planning application now, and as I said, they're not experts in gold mining. And thankfully they've acknowledged their lack of knowledge in this industry. So who have they called on to help them? Dalradian. And we saw in Montana how well that worked out when the mining industry actually helped the regulatory body to process their planning application. And Dalradian has been working with NI Civil Service for several years now. Now, Northern Ireland is the only country in the UK that does not have an independent environmental protection agency. And we have really weak environmental governance already. In fact, NIGS, the Geological Survey, have been going to mining expos and mining conventions and actually declaring Northern Ireland open for mining business and telling mining companies they should come here because of our weak environmental protection governance. And not only do we not have an environmental protection agency, we don't have a marine management organisation to protect our water either. And we don't have effective thresholds in place to ensure our air, water, land qualities and our biodiversity is safe. Now, NI water treatment plants do not test for or treat heavy metals because they've never had to in the past. And heavy metals are a byproduct of precious metal mining and processing. And we all know NI water don't have the money to invest in treatment plants that will test and treat heavy metals. The remediation and monitoring of a gold mine after closure has been typically estimated to be between 150 million and 300 million. Dalradian has allowed $16 million throughout the life of the works and 16 million on closure, a fraction of what is really required. and they plan to stop monitoring the site after 5 years. And we've already heard in Montana that 20 years after that site closed, they are still having problems with their water, and they expect to have problems for the next 120 years. The impact of acid rock alone can last thousands of years. Miners at some of the largest mines in the world move 500,000 tons of earth a day, piloted mounds that can rival the Great Pyramids, and drizzle the ore with poisonous cyanide solution for years. That's from an article that the New York Times did on gold mining several years ago, and it's really informative, and you can look that up online. Now, the environmental risks from hard rock mines often turn out to be understated and underreported, according to 3 recent studies. Now, Robert Repetto, who's an economist at the University of Colorado, he examined 10 mines in the United States and across the world that were run by publicly traded companies. And all but one of those mines failed to disclose risks and liabilities to their investors. The environmental group Earthworks examined 22 mines for a report that they published in November 2010. And almost all of those mines had water problems, leading it to conclude that water quality impacts are almost always understated before mining begins. And in a new study of US gold mines' operating records, there was revealed that they have spilled contaminants, and 74% have spilled polluted water with cyanide, arsenic, nitrates, or other hazardous materials. Now, that particular report, which is the US Gold Mines Spills and Failures Report, they looked at the records of 27 operating US gold mines that accounted for 93% of national gold production in America. And that study found pretty much that gold mines always spill. Gold mines are responsible for 93 Gold mines that are responsible for 93% of US gold production have accidentally spilled cyanide, mine waste, diesel, or other hazardous materials. And gold mines almost always pollute water. 74% of operating gold mines polluted surface and or groundwater, including drinking water. And whenever the gold mines don't pollute water, it's almost always because there's no water nearby. Of all the mines that didn't pollute water, only one actually had a water source nearby. Now, in Greencastle, County Tyrone, it's the proposed site of Dalradian, the proposed site of Dalradian's mine. We have the Sperrins, which is a cultural landscape. It's a home for people. The Sperrins is a living workplace and an important economic resource, which we can never get back once destroyed. There's a dispersed rural community that lives there, and those are families who have lived there for generations, and they don't want to move. Small farmers there want to stay on their land, but obviously they fear the impact of the mine on their land, their livestock, and their livelihood. Who will buy contaminated milk, lamb, and beef? House prices will be devalued, and local people are saying that they're already being refused planning permission and mortgages, and house insurance is rising rapidly. Now, the Sperrins, despite being an area of outstanding natural beauty, has been designated an industrialised zone, with a plan for several commercial wind farms, and now it's going to be excavated for its precious minerals and metals, to be finally destined for the storage of higher activity radioactive nuclear waste. So what is already at Dalradian's proposed gold mine site? Well, on the hill that overlooks the village of Greencastle, we have a primary school, a playgroup, a church, the community centre, and playing fields. We have the Sperrin area of outstanding natural beauty. We have the Owen Killue and Owen Ray rivers, which are special areas of conservation because of their unique marine life. We have areas of special scientific interest in Drumlee and Mullen Woods. There's the Ramsar site, which is the Black Bog, which took 10,000 years to create in nature and could be lost in an hour of mining activity. There are numerous historic and archaeological sites, and it's actually also the area of highest radon in the UK. Now, how could this mine affect us? Well, Northern Ireland is tiny. Think about it. We're a tiny, tiny country. In fact, the whole of Ireland will fit within Canada's borders over 118 times. And what will affect one part of Northern Ireland will affect all of us eventually, and probably in a very short space of time. Now, prospecting licences run from Coleraine to Enniskillen and from the border to Magherafelt. As I said, over a quarter of Northern Ireland has had prospecting licences issued against it. And taxpayers' money is being used to attract the mine and, in all probability, will be used to clean up after it. We have InvestNI, the PSNI, and government departments already giving time, money, and attention to Dalradian. We're going to have air pollution from. Now, as I said, we're a tiny country. If you have toxic air particles from the rocks in the Sperrins, the wind is going to carry that everywhere. You know, there's going to be heavy metals, there's going to be cyanide tailings, there's going to be mercury slag, and there's going to be radioactive contaminants. We're going to have diesel pollution from this massive, massive workforce and the equipment that's being used and the traffic that it's going to generate. And there's going to be increased wear and tear on the roads due to that heavy plant traffic. We're going to have water pollution in the Foyle River system. The farming, fishing, and tourism industry is going to be damaged. Of course, as I said, the Sperrins area of outstanding natural beauty is going to be irreparably damaged and polluted. And there is potentially a proposal to store radioactive nuclear waste in the mine voids. So these are the areas in blue that have prospecting licenses issued against them, and you can see it covers a massive, massive part of Northern Ireland, and it's all west of the Bann, of course. So Dalradian's plan is to create the largest cyanide processing plant in Western Europe, and they're going to do that in Greencastle, County Tyrone. Now, they also have mines in Romania and other parts of Europe. And what I've read, although I cannot confirm this, is that potentially all of that waste, all of that rock, will come to Greencastle in County Tyrone to be processed. So that's even more horrifying. Now, in an area of outstanding natural beauty, 300 metres above sea level, sited over rivers that feed into water treatment plants, which, as we've already said, don't actually test and treat for heavy metals and contaminants like cyanide, sulfuric acid. Oh my goodness. 1 kilometre from a pre and primary school that have 150 pupils between them. As I said, this is an area with the highest radon levels in the UK, and it's 60. Northern Ireland's tiny. Greencastle is 60 miles from any coast, and the toxic particle meters that dust can infiltrate in all directions. Now, there's going to be explosive blasting twice a day, with 2 blasts at a time. And I just want you to think about how, if you're sitting by your phone and it rings, you jump. Imagine what that's going to do to the people who live nearby's nervous system, having that blasting twice a day. And it's going to be using up to 10 tonnes of cyanide a day, although the planning proposal actually has up to 20 tonnes in it. And just as a little aside, in April 2017, 566 MEPs voted to ban cyanide in mining as soon as possible, with only 8 opposing, based on there having been 30 major cyanide incidents in Europe in 25 years. Now, the environmental problems that arise due to mining activities are numerous. And they start with land degradation, degradation of forest. The loss of biodiversity, because you're going to kill all the various animals, plants, insects, soil contamination, air pollution, surface and groundwater pollution, noise pollution and vibrations, deterioration of the Earth's natural drainage system because of the drilling. Perhaps the most significant impact of mining is its effects on water resources. The impact of mining on surface and groundwater is due to spill and tailing, erosion, sedimentation, acid mine drainage, the lowering of the water table, subsidence, disturbance of the hydrological cycle, and rainfall. Acid mine drainage is considered one of mining's most serious threats to water resources. A mine with acid drainage has the potential for long-term devastating impacts on rivers, streams, and aquatic life. Acid mine drainage may be released from any part of the mine where sulfides are exposed to air and water, including waste rock piles, tailings, open pits, underground tunnels, and leach pads. Now, the challenge that we face today is a 21st century one, and that's the injustice of inflicting ecocide, which is global in nature. Corporations and nation states are neglecting their duty to protect the public from the serious harm that arises from dangerous industrial activity, never mind protecting the earth. And it is lawful for companies to cause harm. It is the conscientious protectors of the earth who end up on trial. We need mining reform that prevents pollution, that forces companies to pay to clean up when pollution occurs, because it nearly always does. And we need mining reform that gives communities a say as to whether and how mining occurs. Whether we realise it or not, plants and all the other creatures that we share this planet with are key to our survival and to our continued existence on this beautiful planet. And we cannot keep wreaking havoc. Now, something that's hopefully happening in Colombia is that courts can categorise non-human entities like rivers, forests, mountains, and animals as humans. Now, the courts do not necessarily call them humans, but they can give them the same rights as those given to humans. So when this happens, harm against a non-human entity like the river will carry the same punishment as harm against humans. Now, our current system of living is characterised by perpetual economic growth on a planet that isn't growing. We need to conceive and build a new system that's based on the principle that every generation, everywhere, has an equal right to enjoy natural wealth. And things are only hopeless if we do nothing. So let's do something. What can you do? Well, you can send in an objection letter, and you'll find sample letters are available from Save Our Sparrows on Facebook or Save Our Sparrows website. And there's actually over 15,000 objections sent to the department now. And please ask your family, your friends, your neighbours, your colleagues to object. Get everyone involved in this project. Refuse mining firms or their agents permission to go on your land if you are affected and if they come to try and gain access. You have the right to refuse. And don't sell your land to these people. Inform yourself about the dangers of gold mining. It's literally a Google search away, and you'll be blown away by how awful it is all over the world. Join and set up a campaign group to protect your area. And you lobby your local politicians, your clergy, all your people of influence. Because it really is quite simple. The profits will be all for the mine, and the pollution is all ours. All to create value for shareholders. So please, do what you can to stop gold mining in the Sparrows, because this is in danger and we need your help. Thank you.